Gary Ridgway, also known as the Green River Killer, is the subject of today's topic. Ridgway was your average typical American. He had a job as a truck painter. He was married to Judith Lorraine Lynch. Yet, he had a secret. Over the span of 2 decades, Ridgway had killed 49 innocent human beings, most of which he had done during his 14-year relationship with Judith Lorraine Lynch. I opened this video with a question. How can you catch a serial killer when they're all around us and we don't know? Judith was married to one for 14 years. Without being any the wiser, Judith married a man, Ridgway, who strangled his victims, typically by hand, but sometimes by using ligatures. After killing them, he would usually dump their bodies in the forested and overgrown areas in the county, particularly around the Green River area. Hence his nickname, the Green River Killer. In many cases, he would return to the bodies to engage in sexual activity, and it was sexual activity that eventually led to his downfall. This film aims to cover the sick and depraved mind of Gary Ridgway and the actions that shaped the 1980s and 1990s for the Green River County. Our story begins on February the 18th, 1949 in Salt Lake City in Utah, when Gary Leon Ridgway was born. His father, who was a local bus driver, always complained about the sex workers that you could see lined up across the streets. This was an early indicator in Gary Ridgway's mind. Gary Ridgway would wet the bed quite frequently, and this would carry on into his teens. His mother would wash his genitals in an inappropriate way, according to Ridgway. It was during these times Gary Ridgway noted that he would fantasize about murdering her. As a teenager, he exhibited early signs of violent tendencies, including incidents of stabbing a 6-year-old boy when he himself was just 16. For decades now, scholars have questioned what it is that makes a murderer. What makes a serial killer? Is it their home? Is it their environment? Is it outside factors? Or is it their physiology, their psychology? I think we can both agree that in Gary Ridgway's case, it might be both. Despite this disturbed adolescence, Ridgway went on to lead an apparently normal life as an adult. He held a steady job as a truck painter and married 3 times. He also fathered a son. However, beneath this facade of normalcy lurked a deadly predator. Ridgway's spree began in 1982. His victims were often young women, many of whom were sex workers or runaways. His method of operation involved picking up these women, having sex with them, and then strangling them, often by surprise. He'd dispose of dead bodies in clusters in wooded areas around King County, Washington, with the Green River being a favored location, leading to his infamous nickname, the Green River Killer. Ridgway would sometimes return to the dump sites to engage in necrophilia. Gary Ridgway lived a double life. By day, a truck painter, and by night, a murderer. He would go on unexplained trips, looking for victims, looking for more females to murder. Despite the mounting number of missing women and discovered bodies, law enforcement struggled to identify the killer. In 1982, Ridgway was brought in for questioning for the first time after he was seen with a known prostitute who later went missing. At this time, the police obtained a warrant for his property and vehicles, finding items that belonged to some of the victims. Additionally, they took saliva samples for future DNA testing. Despite the suspicion, there was insufficient evidence to charge Ridgway, and he was released. In the 80s, DNA was still in its infancy as a technology, but as we all know, it would continue to become one of the strongest tools in law enforcement. Ridgway eluded the authorities for the better part of the 1980s and 90s. He continued his normal life, married, and held a job. while simultaneously carrying out his horrific killings. Yet thankfully, forensic detectives held on to those samples. In the late 90s, with advances in DNA technology, the police reopened the cold cases and re-examined evidence collected years before, including Gary Ridgway's saliva. And after some time, once the technology had been perfected, in 2001, a significant breakthrough came. The King County Sheriff's Office, using improved DNA testing techniques, matched the saliva sample taken from Ridgway in the 1980s to DNA found on the bodies of several Green River victims. On November the 30th, 2001, Ridgway was arrested at his workplace for the murders of 4 women: Opal Mills, Marcia Chapman, Cynthia Hines, and Carol Ann Christensen. After his arrest, Ridgway at first played coy. He didn't immediately admit guilt, dragging out the investigation and the legal proceedings. However, in 2003, likely in an effort to avoid the death penalty, Ridgway confessed to 48 murders. In a chilling statement, he shared gruesome details of his crimes, demonstrating a cold and remorseless nature. He later, in 2011, confessed to the 49th murder. The arrest and subsequent trial of Gary Ridgway shed light on the dark underbelly of society, where a seemingly normal man could lead a double life as a ruthless killer. It also underscored the relentless efforts of law enforcement and the pivotal role of evolving forensic science in solving crimes. Yet, it left an indelible scar on the communities affected and raised disturbing questions about the human nature and the existence of pure evil. This has been Mystery. Be sure to subscribe for more true crime documentaries.